Friends, gather round, for tonight we delve into the dramatic world of international shipping canals. Just kidding, it's not usually dramatic. But leave it to Donald Trump to turn a 50-mile stretch of water into a geopolitical pressure point. You see, Trump's been yelling about the Panama Canal again, claiming America's getting a raw deal. He's like that friend who complains about the price of appetizers after they said they weren't hungry. Now, the Panama Canal is a pretty big deal, and I'm not talking about the size of the boats, although some of those are pretty darn massive. This waterway is a vital artery of global trade. It's like the shortcut on your phone's GPS, except instead of saving you 10 minutes, it shaves off thousands of miles for ships traveling between the Atlantic and Pacific. Think of the fuel costs, and time, which as we know, is money, especially when you're shipping tons of cargo. Trump's main gripe? He claims the US is getting overcharged on tolls, those fees ships pay to use the canal. He seems to think it's still 1903 and America gets to use it for free because, we built it. But things have changed, Donnie boy. The canal's importance to global trade is undeniable. It's like the Beyoncé of shipping routes. Everyone wants a piece of it. And that brings us to the heart of Trump's tantrum. He sees the canal as an American asset, even though it hasn't been for almost 50 years. Which brings us to our next exciting chapter. The history of the Panama Canal. Buckle up, folks, it's about to get historical. Now, the history of the Panama Canal is a long and winding one, kind of like the canal itself. The US, in all its early 20th century glory, decided it wanted a shortcut between the Atlantic and Pacific. And what America wants, America builds. Even if it means building it in someone else's backyard. So we struck a deal with Panama, then a wee babe of a nation newly separated from Colombia. The deal? We build the canal, control it, and Panama gets a small cut of the profits. Seems fair, right? Well, not so much. Fast forward a few decades and Panama, no longer the naive youngster, started demanding what was rightfully theirs, control of their own dang canal. The US, never one to back down from a good geopolitical standoff, initially resisted. But eventually, after years of negotiations and growing international pressure, a new treaty was signed in 1977. This treaty, known as the Torrijos-Carter Treaties, set the stage for the complete handover of the canal to Panama by the year 2000. Imagine the audacity of a country wanting to control its own major waterway. The nerve. But alas, logic and fairness prevailed, and Panama finally got to run its own canal. It was a historic moment, a victory for sovereignty and a testament to the power of diplomacy. Of course, some people, like a certain orange-hued former president, still haven't quite come to terms with it. Now let's talk tolls, baby. The lifeblood of any good canal, or at least the thing that keeps the lights on. Trump's central claim is that the US is getting ripped off, forced to pay exorbitant fees while other countries get a free pass. He's basically accusing Panama of running a two-tiered canal system, with the US stuck in the slow lane with a heavier wallet. But here's the thing, Panama denies it. They claim, with evidence I might add, that everyone pays the same. It's like a flat rate at a buffet, except instead of stuffing your face with questionable sushi, you're sailing a giant cargo ship through a narrow waterway. Panama's Canal Authority, the folks in charge of keeping the ships moving and the money flowing, have a whole system for calculating tolls. It's complicated, like trying to understand the US tax code, but the gist is that fees are based on the size of the ship, the type of cargo, and other logistical factors. Nationality, they insist, doesn't come into play. So is Trump right? Is the US being unfairly targeted? Well, there's no evidence to support that claim. It's like accusing your neighbor of stealing your Wi-Fi when you forgot to pay your bill. Sure, it's easy to jump to conclusions, especially when you're predisposed to seeing yourself as the victim, but sometimes the truth is much simpler. You're just wrong. Section 4 Dollars and Cents. Examining the justification for toll increases. Okay, so we've established that everyone pays the same to use the canal. But that doesn't mean the tolls themselves aren't a point of contention. Like any good service provider, the Panama Canal Authority likes to raise prices every now and then. And let's be honest, they've got some big expenses. Maintaining a 100-year-old waterway isn't cheap, folks. It's like owning a vintage car. Sure, it looks cool, but the upkeep can bankrupt you. In recent years, tolls have gone up, and yes, that's led to some grumbling, not just from Trump, but from shipping companies worldwide. But the Panama Canal Authority argues that these increases are justified. They point to rising operational costs, infrastructure upgrades, and, oh yeah, that little thing called inflation. Remember inflation, that economic bogeyman that makes everything more expensive? Yeah, it affects canals too. They've also introduced a new system where companies can pay a premium for faster passage. Think of it like the express lane on a toll road, except instead of avoiding traffic jams, you're avoiding a backlog of cargo ships. And some companies are willing to shell out big bucks for this privilege, millions of dollars in some cases. It's all about supply and demand, folks. And when the demand for canal space is high, so are the prices.